Hello, this is Derek from Future Growth and Vision Norman, and I wanted to kind of just pull this video up today and really kind of open a dialogue and have a conversation. Understanding that one of my critiques is going to be the fact that we talk too much. So I'm participating in that right now. So I'm going to tell you that I'm working on actions as well to let you know that, you know what, I'm not going to be a part of the problem, but I'm going to be part of the solution as well. So I've been working really hard on helping particular business owners, people in Norman, that highlighting our community, showcasing it, getting the word out as far as I possibly can to bring people in and really get them here so that they can meet our city. Because I found that when you come here, when you meet Norman, it's hard not to fall in love with Norman. So that's one of the things that I love is to get people here, creates that synergy, that experience that they like, and then they want to come back and they move here and they add to the fabric of our community, which I love. But let's talk about planning for a second. Arguably, we have the craziest planning process of any city that I've lived in. Now, understand, I've lived in Altus, I've lived in Weatherford, I've lived in Oklahoma City, and I've lived in Norman. I've studied cities all over the country. I've looked at development in cities all over the country and other places. And so it is something that I am very passionate about. But I think we have some great assets that also can be the very thing that stifles what we're doing. So I'm going to say these things. If you disagree, please do. It is up to you to do that. That's great. But I want to go ahead and just put this out there as part of the conversation so we can open things up and really go, these are things that we need to kind of continue to look at. But there's things I love about some of the platforms that we're using. And then there's things that I'm like, why are we doing this? So it's kind of like this back and forth that goes all over. Let's start with the idea that we like to long range plan. And I mean, it's like a major expense and impetus in Norman. We spend a lot of money on consultants. We spend a lot of money on bringing people in to tell us who we are. We spend a lot of money on people to come in here and tell us what we should be doing in our future. And yet we are some of the smartest damn people on the planet. I mean, we've got a Division I institution sitting here. We've got incredible organizations here, and yet we are bringing other people into our city to help us tell us what we need to do. This to me is a little crazy. Recognizing the fact that we have changed significantly from the time that I arrived in Norman almost 20 years ago to now, which is at that point it was more of a united front. There was more people that we are Norman. Everybody kind of knew who we were. We had diverse groups. We all worked together. We played together. We lived together, and it was very kind of cohesive. And it was this idea that we're like, okay, we're doing well. At this juncture in our city, we have some divisions, but at the same time, I think we're coming back to that who we are. And I love that. Why? Because I love every part of Norman, all of it, all of its, excitement, the feistiness, who we are. And I think that brings spice to who we are. I love it. So I love that part of it. Let's talk about a couple things. I think one of the things that we see, for example, Vision 2025, obviously we have to change that. The next thing is August 2025 is coming up. I mean, we're looking at that. So that was a planning process that was over an extended period of time, had it set up, had it set out. At the time it was done, I don't know that we knew we were going to grow as fast as we are. So that is something I can see that you have to go back and redo that or look at it for the next 5 years, next 10 years. But then we bring in something like Strong Towns. Well, Strong Towns is kind of an interesting organization in that it's kind of an anti-development, pro-growth, which sounds crazy because it's not really anti-development. What it really is intentional development, which I think is very valuable. But I also understand that I'm looking at it and going, okay, does it understand the growth of a city our size next to a city that's growing as fast as Oklahoma City is growing? So we have to gather and gain the reins on what we want us to be because we're going to grow. And this is again is something I will say over and over every video, we are going to grow. It's a matter of what we want to grow, how we want to grow, what it wants to look like, what we want it to look like. And we, as Normanites, all are participating in that. So, yes, you may not want a development out by you, but if you had a development that decided it wanted to come out to you, what do you want it designed like? So, have an either or. I mean, you need to have like plan A, plan B, plan C. Why? Because if it doesn't pass, if it's like, oh, well, if you don't get that original thing you wanted, so let's say you wanted a development next to you and you didn't get it, then what do you want to do with the land that's sitting there? If you don't want a development, but now they're putting a development in, are you talking about what that development looks like? Does it look like the aesthetics of where you want it to be? Do you want it to be 10-acre plots? Do you want it to be 5-acre plots? What do you want it to look like? What should that development look like? Should it be walkable? Should there be parks in it? Should we have little shops and stores integrated into neighborhoods so that you can walk down to your local little grocery store, or you can meet each other in a coffee shop in your neighborhood? Do you have meeting spaces that you have built into the plans for these different districts or these different neighborhoods? I think that's important. I think when we look at what we've got as assets, so we are all people are going to love this. Why? Because we do not love construction. Yet we are in a boom right now of construction. Everywhere that you look, we are adding cones, and we always do this. There's an ebb and a flow in Norman. It happens every year. We start projects now, which is March, April. Why? Because then they work on them through the summer when the students are gone. So do they finish them? Not usually. They try to. They do their best, but ultimately there's an overlap some. So we have roads being widened. We have roads being widened going east, roads being widened going north. In case you're wondering, 24th North is going to be widened as well. When you get past Rock Creek and it goes on to Franklin, it's probably going to be a 4-lane because it's going to be, it's one of the major arteries going north. So like east, north is also getting that same kind of development where we're having to widen those roadways. So once we widen those roadways, the reason we're widening those roads is to put cars on them. So we're not widening roads to have less cars. We're not putting utilities out there to have less houses. So we have to recognize the patterns that are developing and go, okay, but then what impact do we want to have? What do you want it to look like? Do you want it to have sidewalks on both sides? Do you want it to be tree lined? Do you want it to have garden spaces in it? Do you want it to have live music areas for people to come and play in your neighborhood? Do you want it to have a pad or two for food trucks to come in your neighborhood? Do you want to have park spaces with gazebos or a place for you to watch movies? What can bring your neighbors together and cohesively bring you together so that you all can get out, say hi to one another, build these communities, walk your neighborhood. It's weirdly enough, I live in an area that had a tornado. And honest to God, I met more neighbors after the tornado than I have in a very long time. I've said hello, I've said hi, but I've not stopped and talked to my neighbors, which is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing. We have sidewalks. We walk all the time with our kids. It is an important part. We like to go to our neighborhood park. We love that. We like going down. There's a hill that goes down by our house. It's like an awesome workout. So, we have all these things available to us, and we've utilized them, but we still need to build more community in the neighborhood. We need to be able to build that cohesion, because I think that's important. That's part of why people move in and why people stay. They stay because they like the neighborhoods that they're in. So that's part of it. So when we look at like strong towns, it's like go slow, make money, which is true. The reality is a city needs to be able to operate. They cannot have a deficit all the time because then they won't be able to operate. So you don't want to overbuild. However, a fast-growing suburb is going to spend money in a different way than a city that has not grown. So if you are not a growing city, one of the ways that you can do is you can just invest in the infrastructure you have. Why? Because guess what? You don't have any growth happening. So you're not building new streets. You're not building new utilities. You're not building new housing divisions because your city's staying the same. So ultimately, that city stays the same. You can infill. You can maybe repave your streets. So those small cities sometimes can look nicer because they don't have to build anything new at the time. They're not growing. They're staying the same. Now, if you're a fast growing city, one of the issues that happens is that your outer areas are growing quickly. So you have to build infrastructure. It's expensive. It is the newest part of the city, and you're always having to maintain it. So it is an expensive proposition. It truly is. So what are you going to do about it? So you have to make sure that you have enough businesses, in our case, tax revenue, because that's how cities are essentially utilize their functions is through sales tax, which is crazy. I mean, there's some craziness involved in that. But ultimately, those cities are going to have to build on the outside, and then with money they have left over, they go back and then they work on areas that have already been built. So older streets will get redone. Older neighborhoods will go back and get repaving, or they'll get fixed with new sidewalks or whatever it is that we forgot to do when we first started it. So the best thing to do when it comes to new development is figure out the things you wish you had that you didn't have and require it in the new build. If you wish you had sidewalks and you had to go back and put it in 20 years later, have it as part of the requirement for the building in the first place. Sidewalks on both sides. If you wish it was tree lined, make sure those trees are in there with the building permit. So that there you go. You've got the trees already in. It's part of the building permit. I mean, it's like, what do you need for these neighborhoods? Get a set idea of what you want for these neighborhoods and then let them know. If you're in a certain style, now here's the things I love about Strong Towns. Let me just do this real quick. I love the idea of the small businesses, and I was shocked, and I read the article about the economic impact of small business versus large businesses, and it made sense once he put it in a graphic form, but it made a whole lot more sense when I thought about it further, which is a small business you don't give an incentive to. A small business, they are a make or break. They go in, they build community, they get a relationship with their customers, and they have to live or die by the way that they work and interact with their customers. So their revenue is smaller. They don't have as much electricity, as much overhead, and they make more money. So those small businesses actually do very, very well in cities. So you want to create small business villages, small business areas, and more opportunity for small business to grow in your cities. Does that mean we don't want large business? No, it does not. But what it recognizes is that the value, as far as revenue is concerned and assets are concerned, is in the smaller business sector more so than even the large scale businesses. I love my Hitachis. I love my National Weather Service. I like Target. I like Walmart. I like the different stores that are out there. But I love my downtown. I love my east side. I love my small shops that I go to. I love Rusty's. I said, but I love Brahms too. So I'm like, right? So you have like this mix. You love everything. So we want to continue to build all those assets and create that. What I also do appreciate, we had the medieval fair this last weekend. The weather was beautiful. Not always does that happen, but it was a beautiful weekend. With that being beautiful, we had an enormous amount of people that came to Norman for the weekend. This gave me a little bit of a future look in what happens if our city grows exponentially quickly. So let's say they added 100,000 people, and that's over the 3-day period. So let's say they did 30 to 50,000 a day. We could add that many residents in the next, like, I don't know, 3 years, 4 or 5 years. We could add that many residents to Norman. If we do, what did our infrastructure look like this last weekend? What did Highway 9 look like this last weekend? If we look at that and say, okay, that's what we would have on an everyday basis of people living here without the university and students coming in, which is additional 30,000, by the way. So then we have to look at that on top of that. So then we're looking at kind of this strain that's on our system. So we do have to figure out ways that we move people around, ways that people get around, or what if they don't want to take a car? Can we get them somewhere else? So our bus system, how do we encourage more of that? And there's a lot, and I know there's a lot, and you guys have planned, and you've talked about this. I promise you, there's like thousands and thousands of pages of documents and comments on the bus system in Norman, on public transportation in Norman. I mean, this has been talked to and about. This has been debated. This has been challenged. This has been set up for years, like years and years and years. Now let's talk One Norman for a second. One Norman is an interesting thing. Why? Because it essentially saw that and said there's people from all over different places, different interests, and trying to put them together. I do like that because it gets everybody in the same room and it's like, let's have a conversation, put people together, and come out united in as one Norman. And I'm like, look, if you don't believe it, look at one OKC. And when we do that, when we as a collective people get together and do something at the same time together, we're phenomenal. There is no place better than Norman, Oklahoma when Norman goes all in. If you don't believe it, look at game day. Look at a game day in Norman. Look at the Norman Music Festival. Look at all the different, I mean, when we get together, look at Second Friday. Every month we have a citywide people coming downtown to just celebrate each other and the essence of who we are, whether it's music or it's fun, it's I mean art, it's all the things that we love. This is who we are. And we know this. We know this. So having to study this another 2 years or study this for another 4 years makes no sense. I agree the 6 months to 9 months, like getting it on paper, saying, okay, this is what needs to happen. Long range planning, you have to do that. You have federal funding, there's things like that you have to work out. I get that. So, and I think capital improvements, when you look at long range, I get that as well. But we need to have that list and have it ready to go like now, because those funds are getting spent now. So we need to have everything on and ready to go. If we're going to look at street beautification, what streets, which ones, what areas, and what do we want done? I did a video on, which is actually kind of, I kind of critique myself because I did it at 49th and 50th and MacArthur in Oklahoma City. They have beautiful street lamps over there. They redid it. And I thought, as I was driving back here on Lindsay, West Lindsay, coming off of I-35, I thought, we've already done this. We've already done this. Why did I film that when I could have filmed this, which is ultimately West Lindsay from I-35 to campus and actually beyond campus to Classen. All the lamps and everything are decorative, but it stops at Classen. Why would the decoration stop at Classen? That Lindsay corridor can go all the way through Norman to 24th. And then at some point past 24th when we're to that development phase. But it gives you a decorative corridor from I-35 all the way through Norman. It's beautiful. You get to go through campus. It's like a scenic drive in Norman if you keep doing it. But we stopped at Classen. Like at Classen, it just ended. And it would help for development in that Classen corridor on Lindsay, on the 12th to 24th on Lindsay, to have that decorative element and to really build on. There's a shopping center there that needs tenants. It needs to be, honestly, it needs to be bought. I mean, whether either someone buys it or they renovate it, or whatever they need to do. I said it needs to be like taken care of. And that the one on 12th and by CVS is a beautiful little shopping center underneath the lofts. It really is. It's pretty. It's not always full. But so it needs to stay full, get full, and remain full. I mean, that's one of the things. All those shops on the bottom should be rented out all the time, or at least out all the time. If they're not, I don't understand why not. That's an owner question that needs to be handled. But look, Classen's getting busy. Classen's getting really busy. You look at Classen and Constitution, or Classen, I guess South is what I would call it. It's getting real busy. We have Pinocchio's down there, and it's not going to be slow. That corner right there is really congested, partly because we have everybody coming in out of Noble and South on 77, which is also getting really busy. So we have all these like congregated areas that are the corridors going down south, corridors going east and north, corridors up in the north side, and we have all these things that are happening. Those areas need to get more attention because the growth areas there's more cars there, there's more people there, there's more eyes there. So these are our windows coming into Norman. Besides Highway 9. Highway 9 is coming in, and I mean, you all know, I'm not even going to talk about Perfect Swing. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm just going to say that and not say anything else. Y'all know what everybody thinks about Perfect Swing at this point. But There are some gateways to our city that we need to look at besides Lindsay, besides Main Street, even besides Robinson. I said we need to look at Highway 9's coming in. What does it look like coming in? Then we look at what about Classen coming in? Also 77 from the south. What about, like I said, 24th that comes in going across? It looks nice. I'll be honest with you. 24th from Highway 9 to Robinson is beautiful. It's really quite pretty. I said there's some areas that need to be filled in as far as like with retail or whatever that designation is for those lots. Those lots might not be commercial, but if they're designated commercial, I hope they put eclectic shops in there, nice shops in there that are really good for the area and the neighborhood. And they fit what they're looking at on that 24th corridor. The gas station on the corner, the roof fell in because of the tornado. It needs to be knocked down, either build a new one or figure out what we're going to do with it. But there's no point having the Sinclair that's got a roof falling in right there. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So we're looking at those things and kind of the cleanup, which is amazing. By the way, Easter's neighborhood has cleaned up a lot. It still has a long ways to go, but it's something they've worked really, really hard, and it's important. So I look at that. I look at one Norman. I do look at the interests in Norman. We have a lot of people that have different interests, but have the same interests. So if you look at, again, the Norman Chamber of Commerce, the NEDC, you got the University of Oklahoma, you got Visit Norman, you've got all the different growth groups, you got the development groups, you got the realtor groups, you have all these things that have similar ideas of how things should go. And then you have like all these differing opinions that need to get on one page. That's where I think one Norman is a little bit different. And I will say this. I'm watching and I want to see how that process plays out and how it goes. And I hope that it goes the way I think it's going to, and that the effect is the right thing that we're looking for. I think the cause is right. I think now the effect has to be taken into consideration. People that have a fight, I get that you have a fight. I get that you're like, wait a minute. I built my house here and it was this way. Understand, and this is something I'm going to remind everybody who's building in Norman, Oklahoma. We are not shrinking, and we will not be shrinking. If you are looking for a rural environment in Norman, Oklahoma, you need to go a long ways out. We're talking like a long ways out. Not, I mean, like very, very, very far out, because Norman's not going to shrink. If Oklahoma City gets bigger, guess what gets bigger? The suburbs around it. Why? Because people want to move to areas that are quieter than Oklahoma City. When I left Northeast Expressway in 63rd, I moved to Norman. I thought it was a quiet city. And it was, and it still is. It still is quieter than that corner, I promise you. So what you consider to be noisy right now, someone else is coming out here because they think it's quiet. So their suburb this is their quiet space versus downtown Oklahoma City or Southside Oklahoma City or Northside Oklahoma City or wherever they're from, or LA or wherever. They're coming here and thinking this is a perfect little quiet area for them to be in, and you're concerned about the noise. They will pay to make sure they can move to this quiet area. So that is the thing that we need to look at as well. We are a unique city. We are a helpful city. And I've said this before, and I will say this again. We have over 200 nonprofits in the city of Norman. Why? Because we help people. We have people from all walks of life with all different things going on, of all abilities, and we are here to help them. If that's not who you are, if that's not what kind of a value that you have, then what city are you in? Because this city's been doing this since I arrived, and way before I arrived. It was known as a city that helps. It was known as a city that cares and takes care of people and lets people be who they are, and really lets them embrace their uniqueness, whatever that is. And I think that's super important. I think that really is. So these are all things that I'm just thinking, but I'm just thinking it. The actions that I want, I'm like, oh, the planning. I think there's things that are going to happen that I don't know about. And you know what? I acknowledge the fact that there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes that I don't know. That's true. If I knew everything, it'd be amazing, but I don't. So And that way I'm learning as well. And I appreciate, let me tell you, I know the men and women that are working in this area. I know them and I know who they are. And I know they're working their tails off to help us get this thing aligned. And yes, the SEC is a little different. I did not know the ramifications of that. I knew it was a big deal, but I didn't know it was as much of a big deal. So this sped up timeline is something we have to take into consideration. And I think that is something that we collectively are going to do. But again, who are we? What are we about? And let's move. That's my thing. Let's move. Left foot, right foot. I do love strong towns that says do the next thing. I like that. Do the next small thing. That small thing could be you all create a garden in the front of your yard, or you do something that is that you help out a neighbor, or you clean up a sidewalk somewhere, or maybe just put a planter in the front. Maybe just beautify your front yard, your porch, and then your neighbor does their porch, and your neighbor does their porch. Guess what? We all do our porches. All of a sudden, we have an amazing neighborhood where everybody's walking around looking at each other's porches. I said, it's super neat. I love rosemary. And you know what? There's a lady down my block. She had a 4-foot rosemary bush that was 4 foot wide. I was super impressed by her rosemary bush. I went and bought my own. Why? Because it was so exciting. I got my own. It was just neat. And so I'm like, and we decorate our homes. We showcase our homes because they give you a little glimpse into who we are. And I think that is super neat to be able to share that and showcase who we are and let it happen. I know a lot of you guys live in historic districts. Those historic districts are beautiful. If you haven't walked them or looked at them or gone to see the people that live there, please do that. Why? Because those homes mean something to people. If you live in a suburban area, those homes mean something to people too. It is different. It is, it's not uniquely built necessarily, but maybe they've added unique features to it, or they're just unique people to be able to meet and visit and talk to and get to know. Like I said, incredible people live here. You have no idea who your neighbor is. Your neighbor could be a professor at OU. They could work for the meteorology center. They could be an artist. They could be a musician. They could be an activist, an advocate. I said they could be anybody. They could be a business owner. They could be a rancher. They could have all kinds of live animals. They could have chickens. That's the unique part of who we are, is that we are an incredible place to live, an incredible place to work, and an incredible place to play. So hopefully this adds a little something to your brain to say, who are we? What do we want? Let's do it. Not who are we? What do we want? Let's develop a committee, plan on it, and maybe in 2 years we'll think about, doing it more. Nope. No more 2 years business. Let's get this done. We have to kind of keep moving. Now we can forward plan. That's good. But let's showcase what we've executed, what we're doing now. And maybe that might be the issue. It might be that we're doing a ton and we're just not, there's no list. Let's make a list. Let's tell people what we're up to, tell people what we're doing so they can see that we're moving and moving forward and moving forward together. And of course, it is a great time for you to come and visit, and I will see you soon.